What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here in our podcast, What's Going on in Pop Culture right now. We got a lot of great stuff to get to this week. A ton of music. Lady Gaga, first album in 5 years. Jennie from Blackpink, debut solo album. Yeji, debut solo. Seulgi from Red Velvet solo. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Yeji's debut solo EP, Air. Yeji, the first member of ITZY to release a solo project, although all the ITZY members did release solo tracks on the recent albums, but this is still a pretty big step forward for the JYP group. And I've been struggling with ITZY the last handful of releases at this point. For me, it's really just been the inconsistency of the group. They're just so up and down, really in terms of concept, in terms of song idea, where I find something I really like, such as Untouchable, and then something I really don't care for, such as Gold. And it does feel like, at least to a certain extent, ITZY is kind of being left behind by some of their girl group peers, especially some of the newer groups that are a few years newer than them. Nonetheless, I'm still a fan of the group because I think when they're on, they're a really engaging, fun, light group. It makes sense that Yeji would release some solo music because, her early days, for time she was really public, she actually was on like an audition show of some kind as a soloist, which was like an early first taste. But really, she is a very talented, K-pop star, very much fitting that all-rounder ace archetype in terms of just quality singer, dancer, presence, versatile on the mic, engaging. I've always been a fan of her. I think she's consistently the strongest or one of the strongest members on any given ITZY song. And even though ITZY's been around for a while now, pre-pandemic they debuted, Yeji's only 24, so there's so much runway for her to, be a successful soloist, and in addition to, a big part of ITZY. Yeji's debut EP, Air, is a great success. I honestly think this is an awesome sound for her. Air clearly communicates a solo identity for Yeji, separate from her successful work as one of the key members of ITZY. My biggest beef with this EP, this mini album, is that it's so short. It's only 4 songs. We needed so much more from this, but thankfully all 4 of these songs are successful. The Air title track is an electropop song. It's just great drums. I think they're really fun. I love the way the bass drops in the chorus, these twinkly chimes, adding some more bass with the second verse. I think the Air refrain is a bit repetitive and not great, but thankfully we don't really linger on that, and the lyrics are actually pretty solid. I also really enjoyed the breakdown at the end of the song. Invasion is another great song. I think that beat is awesome. I love that synth melody. The call and response vocals on the second verse are great, and Yeji singing just some really smooth vocal flourishes. And then on the outro, you have these choir vocals in the background with Yeji. I like the song. Can't Slow Me No, very up tempo, lots of bells, kind of like a classic ITZY vibe. This one very much sounds like an ITZY song, has that playful energy. Almost sounds like Yeji's doing the traditional Rujin ad-libs you would hear in a normal ITZY song. There's also a lot of English on this. I'm curious if this actually was a reused, recycled ITZY song they decided to use as a solo song instead. And then lastly, 258, another electropop song. I love the tempo in the verses. I don't really love the chorus though. I don't think it really stands out too much. It's just less groovy than how the verses are going, which I think is a lot more engaging than that chorus. But the bridge is still pretty good. So I think that's probably my least favorite song, 258, but still a solid track at the end of the day. But that's why we always want more on a project. 4 songs is barely an EP. 4 songs is such a brief moment, and especially when you're debuting as a soloist, you have these 4 songs. The solo song she released on the last ITZY project, there's just so much more to put out there, But that's just how these projects often go, right? She's gonna promote the single Air, and then I'm sure there'll be ITZY music coming out this summer. That's just how these small mini album cycles go, but I definitely would have liked to hear more. Nonetheless, still in on ITZY and in on Yeji as a soloist, so hoping to hear more soon. Let me know though, what did you think of Yeji's debut EP, Air? What was your favorite song? What you like most about it? And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Seulgi's second mini album, Accidentally on Purpose. Seulgi, one of the key members of Red Velvet, with officially her second mini album, first one since 2022. She's released a good amount of solo music over the years. Of course, Red Velvet pretty established at this point. Many of the members have pretty established solo music at this point. I think Seulgi also found a lot of success with her subunit with her bandmate Irene. SM has announced that the Irene Seulgi subunit will be returning with new music first half of 2025, so we'll be hearing more soon for sure. I think Red Velvet, they've been pretty steady the last few years, but haven't really grasp the big commercial heights of kind of the early years of their career as more and more new groups seem to get more of the attention, but they're still super steady. I think of the song from I think 2 years ago, One Kiss, that I absolutely loved, and they have just a great floor as a group because they're also talented vocally, like most SM groups. And Seulgi has long stood out as one of the more talented but still unique vocalists. She just kind of has a presence that stands out in a group. And it makes sense that she was selected as one of the members of the SM female supergroup Got the Beat a few years back, alongside her bandmate Wendy. Nonetheless, we finally have another official solo project with Accidentally on Purpose. I like Seulgi's second mini album, Accidentally on Purpose, quite a bit. This had a lot more attitude and energy than I was expecting, just because there's an inherent rock undertone to this music. The title track, Baby Not Baby, I love the guitar chords on this song. There's just has a great rhythm, and I think Seulgi has an awesome swag on the mic as she's kind of doing this like light rapping with the verses. Beat wise, I love the string flourish you get into that pre-chorus. This song notably produced by Eric Serna, who worked closely with Olivia Rodrigo recently. Seulgi curses on the song. I think the song's a lot of fun. And that continues with track 2, Better Days, which has just these hard drums, great kick drums specifically. I like the chorus. Seulgi giving you kind of like a lower register singing on that. Just kind of a hard song, honestly, and you don't really say that about a lot of K-pop music. Track 3, Rollin' With My Homies, this definitely has some quirky bells, and it's much more of a melodic song than the first 2 tracks. I like the sentiment of the song, but I think beat-wise, it just didn't grab me nearly as much as the other 2, which are a lot more brash and in your face. Whatever sounds nice, but doesn't really stand out to me. I think it's kind of the least interesting song of the bunch. Praying, I like this one because Seulgi's a bit more pitched down vocally on this one. It's a bit of a switch up. Then the last track, Weakness, I think this chorus is pretty dull. You do have these smooth summary drums which keep it pretty, nice and pleasant, but I think, songwriting wise, the song just isn't that interesting. But those first 2 tracks, Baby Not Baby, Better Days, and even kind of the uniqueness of Rollin' With My Homies, I'll take that. I'd be really curious what we get from the next subunit music, the Irene, Seulgi stuff, just because that first time around, that project was pretty successful, and I feel like Irene hasn't had quite as big of a solo impact recently. She had a project come out last year that I didn't think was super big, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Seulgi still got it. Red Velvet's been around a minute now, but they're pretty certified at this point as a group, and I think her vocal versatility really stands out on this project, even if the project to me kind of tails off in the second half. She's a fun vocalist. I think she's just really good. Let me know, though, what you think of Seulgi's second mini album, Accidentally on Purpose, what you like most about it, and for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Welcome Back Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Jennie's debut solo album, Ruby. Alas, the month of Blackpink's solos is concluded. Rose album back in December, Jisoo EP on Valentine's Day, Lisa album last week, and now Jennie. And it's been a great ride. This has been a very successful solo period for the Blackpink ladies. And the Jennie album, of course, has come with a ton of anticipation because Jennie simply has not released nearly as much solo music as you would expect for someone of her stature. She released the song Solo way back in 2018, and since then we've only got You and Me and the remix version of it. That's been it. Surprisingly, at least a little bit, her feature on the Weeknd song One of the Girls, that song is 1.6 billion streams on Spotify. That song kind of tick off after the fact. Never quite understood why that song got so big. Of course, due to her affiliation with Idol, that's why she collaborated with the Weeknd. Nonetheless, we've been wanting a Jennie record for some time. Jennie linked up with Columbia Records for her solo album, created her own label production company, Odd Atelier, or OA, And she's only doing a little bit of performances for this, 3 quick shows before she does Coachella. Not really doing too much solo work. We know a Blackpink tour is coming later in the year. But there's been a lot of hype for this. THR had the stat at 450,000 pre-orders for this album. People were locked in. Single-wise, we had Mantra come out last year. Had a good amount of singles, with Mantra coming out last year, followed by Zen in YouTube music video only form in January, and then Love Hangover with Dominic Fike and Extra with Doechii in recent weeks. Jennie's debut solo album, Ruby, rules. This is what we've wanted from a Jennie solo album. After all the years, all the hype, the lack of solo output, finally getting it, and this album delivers. Ruby gives you the essential traits of Jennie's artistry, which is her swag, her attitude, her persona, and also her versatility. This album jumps around a lot, but doesn't come across as scatterbrained. What I liked most about Ruby was that the hip-hop inspiration was incredibly varied. Jennie is giving us a lot here and really making good on her previous rap status. Frankly, I think the hip-hop we get on Ruby is better than almost anything she did with Blackpink. My favorite song is With the IE, parentheses, Way Up. That is a 2000s rap bop. She's excellent on the song. Her collaboration with Dua Lipa, Handlebars, is also great, making good on Kiss and Make Up from many years ago. I really liked almost every song on the album. I think the production, the performances, vocal inflections, the decision making, it's very interesting because it really keeps you on your toes. This is a really satisfying album. The first track is a pretty understated intro with some twinkly keys, and then track 2 is Like Jennie, which also already has a music video out. This is an interesting one. This is a rap song. The hook is catchy, has these bass hits going in. The second verse, you get kind of like a different inflection, a higher energy from Jennie, and actually the only moment of Korean vocals from Jennie in the rap verse there. Outro is a bit repetitive for me, but I still think a fun, silly, like low stakes type song. Diplo co-produced this one, and Zico co-wrote this one, which I think is notable. Of course, Zico and Jennie had their song Spot last year become a pretty solid hit. From Like Jennie into Start a War is a complete vibe shift, and the first of many on Ruby. Love the snare drums and like the orchestral flourishes in the background. The melody, very reminiscent of, to me, what I first thought of was Night Changes by One Direction, but I actually checked the sample is White Mercedes by Charlie XCX. People have often compared those two songs together because they're very similar melodically and whatnot. Fun touch point. People are going to recognize that. Handlebars would do I really like this one a lot. Kiss and Make Up, which of course is a Dua Lipa song featuring the Blackpink members. That was, I believe, the first Blackpink feature, period. Certainly their first feature with anyone Western. And that's a song I like quite a bit. Blackpink's not on the song too much, but it's a fun song. I mean, they actually performed it way back in the day, which was really cool. This song, though, like, Dua glides over the drums when she comes in, and the back and forth vocals between Jennie and Dua are great. The guitar, the drum on the chorus. Frankly, this is the Dua energy that we needed more of on Radical Optimism last year. It's very throwback Dua vocals. As a big fan of hers, like, this sounded great. This is exactly what I love from her. Notably, Jennie is not credited as a writer on this song. She is a co-writer on 11 of the 15 songs, but she's not on Handlebars, but Dua Lipa and Amy Allen are. I'm curious if this was a song that maybe Jennie picked up, from the label from elsewhere. As I mentioned, my favorite song is With the IE, Way Up. This song fucking rules. The hook is excellent. I mean, the shimmy shimmy ya part, when I first heard that, my mouth dropped just a little bit just because I love the hip-hop inspiration that she's bringing to this. Shout out ODB. Bouncy, funky drums, horns as well. This is the first of 3 songs from producer Dem Joints, who has actually become a massive K-pop producer. He didn't start out as a K-pop producer, but now he's made, I think, a lot of big songs. I mean, recently he did Supernova from aespa, Heya by IVE, Gold by ITZY. He's worked with K-pop for, I think, the last 6 years or so. He's a pretty significant figure. I think one of the most common Western producers for K-pop groups that you'll find. So actually it makes a lot of sense that Jennie making an album with Columbia, making a Western record, she would find, working with Dem Joints easy enough. But yeah, I think this song is a total bop. This is my favorite songs, one I've revisited the most thus far. Next up is the fourth single, I believe, Extra, featuring Doechii. I mean, talk about timing with this feature. Doechii is incredibly hot right now, coming off the Grammy win, viral performances, her latest song, Anxiety, blowing up. She's becoming a star rapidly, and this is a big feature. Now, Jennie, I love her as a rapper. I think she's one of my favorite, in the K-pop sphere. Her rapping against Doechii is a tall task. It's a ballsy move, and Doechii, unsurprisingly, really outclasses her on the song, just in terms of pure rap ability. But I think the song still works. I do love when they go bar for bar, over that bass in the second half of the song. The chorus I think is probably the weakest chorus to me on probably the whole album. To be honest, the foreign cars hook. I always cringe a little bit when I hear that from Jennie. I said the same thing about Lisa last week. It just comes across a bit inauthentic sometimes when they get kind of overly flexy like that. But I think the song is still pretty cool, and Dochi's rapping is great. Mantra, the lead single from last year, frankly, is less interesting now in the context of the album, which actually I think makes it a great single because it was a great and successful single last year when it came out, and now it doesn't have to carry the album anymore because the album is giving you so much more that you hadn't heard already. I think that's like a sign of a great album and a successful single. That's a fun poppy bop, fun to perform. She obviously promoted the song a lot already. I love when the cowbell kicks in, on the bridge. The third single, Love Hangover, featuring Dominic Fike. I think this song's okay. This one didn't really grab me when I first heard it. Doesn't really make a difference to me in the album. It feels kind of out of place compared to most of the other songs on the album, frankly. I think Dominic Fike's performance is good. Great example of what he always does, the way he plays with melody. Song's okay. Doesn't really grab me too much. Nice video, though, with Charles Melton in place of Fike. And then at last, we get Zen. Zen came out as a music video at the end of January, but was never released on digital streaming platforms until today with the Ruby album release. And frankly, I found that perplexing, because when I saw the Zen music video, I was transfixed. I think that is a spectacular video, probably going to be the K-pop video of the year. Just so visually interesting, so varied, very flashy, high production value. You don't really get something as overtly cinematic as like that, in most music videos. It's great. And also, I think the song itself is awesome. I think vocally, that is probably the best example of Jennie invoking Rihanna with this music. Just listen to the way she enunciates Nobody on the chorus. It's clearly Rihanna homage in a great way. I think she does a great job with it, but this song is awesome. Damn Right, featuring Childish Gambino and Kali Uchis. I think this song is fine. Surprisingly, you get the Mike Will Made It tag on this. He actually did 4 of the beats. Really just kind of sparse drums for the most part, and other percussion. Definitely a slowdown moment from the rest of the album. The hook to me is like just okay. That's what holds the song back. Cali's fine. Gambino glides in. Once he switches up into rap, he does that kind of like monotone flow he's been doing of late, which is not my favorite. Song's okay. Then we switch up again because FTS is a piano ballad torch song, very sparse production. Vocals though are pretty good. I think the arrangement is good. It's just a bit underwritten to me. I think this song was punched up a little bit more. It would probably stand out a bit more. Filter, I love the build-up with the production, specifically that drum progression. Another vocally varied song from Jennie, although, again, a bit underwritten. Soul City, I think, is okay, but very vibey. I like the second verse over the snares. Starlight, we get up-tempo again. Pretty catchy hook, but vocally, I think, is just okay. Probably one of the least interesting performances from Jennie vocally. The repetitive yeah breakdowns, I think, kind of grind the song to a halt for the most part. And then the last track out of nowhere is Twin, which is this random acoustic song, but somehow is also a Mike Will beat. That one certainly felt out of place too, because I don't think we heard acoustic at all to that point. But you know how outros go. Final songs, they usually do something like that. But yeah, this is exactly what I wanted from the Jennie solo album. I mean, there's been so much hype, so much starts and stops, so much, I think, really earned, waving of the fist at YG Entertainment for just really bungling managing Blackpink's solo output just because there fucking wasn't any, And just because there really wasn't any. And now that Jennie's in control of her own output on the solo side of things, this is a really impressive, body of work, and kind of reflecting back on this Blackpink solo era that's now concluded. Obviously, Rose completely blossomed and did a lot of stuff, in terms of singer-songwriter music that we expected from her from what we'd seen. Jisoo also took a big step forward as someone who we haven't had much of a musical opinion on as a soloist, frankly, to this point. And Lisa also, I think, really improved with Alter Ego, doubling down on what she does best, but also showcasing a bit more than she had before. And of course, Ruby, I think, is just the kind of the cherry on top at this point because it's just really excellent all around. Uh, Frankly, I think now there's a lot of pressure on the Blackpink return, right? You have to imagine that's the second half of the year because both Lisa and Jennie are doing solo performances at Coachella this year. Jennie's gonna wrap up these Ruby concerts really quick, but you have to imagine the Blackpink stuff is second half of the year at minimum, and frankly, have they worked on anything? I don't think they have, right? Because they've all been working on their solo stuff, doing their own promotions, been busy. Lisa's on the White Lotus right now. She's been promoting that too. Obviously, they're so involved in the fashion world for them. Have they gone back to YG and recorded a new Blackpink album? I'm inclined to say they haven't. So, what are they going to do? Like, right after Coachella, they're going to all run back to Korea, crap out an album, and release it in July? I doubt it. So, I think the expectation would probably be like, kind of how like Born Pink came out in the fall. I think that's the most likely outcome, if not later, of course. So we'll see. But man, this has been a really satisfying journey, and I think again, it's kind of speaks to the new ground that Blackpink members have been paving for themselves, because there's never been K-pop artists that have been in this position to take this control of their own identity solo wise. Obviously, the BTS guys could certainly all do this if they wanted, but they're largely staying within the big hit system with their solo work. But it's been really cool to see the Blackpink members branch out while still staying together, assuming the Blackpink stuff comes later. But yeah, really happy with this. Let me know, what'd you think of Jennie's Ruby? What was your favorite song on the album? What song are you bumping the most? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Lady Gaga's 7th album, Mayhem. Gaga back with her first proper album since Chromatica came out way back in 2020. Of course, Chromatica, the Chromatica Ball tour was COVID delayed, so Gaga's been a little busy, wrapping up, gearing up into a new album cycle. Of course, last year she co-starred in Joker 2, Joker Folie à Deux. A good performance from her despite that movie's major shortcomings. Gaga released a jazz album, Harlequin, in support of that album, which didn't perform all too well, kind of similar to her previous venture with this, the, duet collab album she made with Tony Bennett a while back. However, she did release the Mayhem lead single, Disease, way back in the fall, which found some success, but not nearly as much success as the second single for this album, which of course would be the Bruno Mars duet, Die With A Smile, which is somehow over 2 billion streams on Spotify. Just a massive record. It already won the Pop Collab Grammy this year, and that's a song that I don't really care for. It's not my style of music, but it's clearly such a massive song. I think Bruno's international fame really helps buoy that as well. His playlisting success, I think, just contributes to that song just kind of being on all the time, being on radio all the time, etc. So good for them. And regardless of my misgivings about Die With A Smile, I was very much anticipating a new Lady Gaga album, just because Lady Gaga is one of, if not the most singular force we have in pop music right now. And given the 2024 we just had in pop music, where we actually had new stars break through with Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan, and a familiar face break through like never before in Charlie XCX, it's cool to then see the more stalwart veterans of the pop space return and reestablish themselves. What's great about Lady Gaga's seventh album, Mayhem, is this is Gaga once again reminding us of her core strengths. This is a very cohesive album, fast drums, loud guitars, banger synths, very campy in the mode we expect from Lady Gaga, big choruses across the album. The songwriting on this is just so tight and speaks to, again, Gaga's core strength of pop convention with her indelible one-of-one personality. It's just a great mix. Single Abracadabra is very much back to the basics energy. Monster Chorus, great bridge. It's very much bad romance coded, and if you're a Lady Gaga fan, that's music to your ears. Literally. Album cut Shadow of a Man has hardcore telephone energy. Again, a great feeling. Overall, I find the album really successful. If there's any quibble I have with it, is that a lot of the song structures are kind of similar in terms of how they build up to the choruses. The production range is largely the same. I would not call this album samey though, because again, I think it just speaks to the overall songcraft going in. Kind of going through the track list here, the very first single, again, Disease, was really a sign of things to come, right? It has these big drums and has this really big chorus. Abracadabra, the same thing. I think Abracadabra almost gives me kind of like a Eurodance energy in terms of the campiness that Lady Gaga is bringing you on that, but that's a great song. It's exactly what you think of when you think of Lady Gaga's brand, her sound, and I think it's a it's an awesome big song. I'm glad it's a hit so far. Garden of Eden, I think the guitar chords are really great on that. The synthesizers are really bumping. Another banger bridge, and just vocally really awesome from Gaga. Sounds great. Perfect Celebrity, kind of more like an industrial vibe, at least a little bit, but the chorus really rocks out. I love the call and response vocals. The drummer's really spazzing out. Sounds really good. It's really hard, really loud. Vanish Into You, again, another big chorus. I mean, Gaga doing the press for this album even talked about how you can't go wrong with a great chorus. And frankly, I agree, especially when it's coming from her, someone who's so unique and so vocally great. Killa features none other than Gesaffelstein, which I wasn't expecting to hear them collab. It's kind of the first real switch up, sound wise on the album. Kind of like a higher, lighter register from Gaga's singing. I think Gesaffelstein, he really kind of fits into this. Like, they don't sound like his songs so much as they sound like him in support of Gaga's own music. So it fits right into the vibe, which I think is exactly kind of what you want from a DJ producer matching up with a big star. Zombie Boy is one of my favorite songs on the whole album, if not my favorite. This is like an 80s glam track, very groovy, very disco. I think this is great and kind of feels like Gaga's revisiting or trying out the kind of 80s pop convention that we found in mainstream pop in the 2020s. Gaga hadn't really done that to this point. It really wasn't on Chromatica at all. And even if I think that trend has kind of subsided, at least for now, over the last 2 years, it's cool to hear Gaga's take on it because it still has all of the Gaga quirks. I think it's a great track. Love Drug, I also like this one quite a bit. Very up-tempo drums, very strong vocals. I think the pre-chorus in particular is the best moment on the song. Don't Call Tonight, another great groove. Shadow of a Man, as I mentioned, hardcore telephone energy. I also love the guitar outro on that. The Beast, perhaps the biggest vocal showcase of all the songs from Gaga. I think that one's great. And then Blade of Grass, kind of out of nowhere, as a slowing it down piano ballad, which obviously we know Lady Gaga is very great at making, but just wasn't really a vibe we were getting on Mayhem to this point. Song kind of slows down and kind of loops and repeats itself after a while for me. Not my favorite ballad from her. And again, kind of feels a bit out of place on the album before it actually ends with That With a Smile, which feels kind of tacked on, again, in the context of the rest of Mayhem, but it's a monster hit. You kind of got to keep it on there for the streaming synergy, so I get it. But yeah, man, Lady Gaga, I think this is a reminder of, a lot of the inspiration points from Chapel Roan, right? Chapel Roan didn't invent all of the camp stylings that she's so successfully brought into her artistry, right? Lady Gaga is a big OG for Chapel in that regard. And of course, Lady Gaga is not the inventor, the originator of any of this as well. But it's cool to, I think, see Gaga so effortlessly kind of reinvent and reestablish herself in pop the way she's done a few times. Obviously, she's dabbled with so many different genres. Like, we are so far removed from the sounds of Joanne on this album, for example. And, Gaga, her advancing age in the definition of mainstream pop stars, she's proving that age is just a number, which is, of course, great to see and speaks to her actual, kind of timeless talent. We know she'll tour this album. I would love to see her live. I'd want to see the Chromatica Ball, but it was just so pricey, with the live music demand post-COVID was through the roof. I just couldn't justify it. Would love to see her perform, this next tour. I've never seen her live. I've also long thought that eventually she'll do some kind of residency at the Sphere in Las Vegas. I think that would just be such a visual feast that's a must see whenever that does happen. We're probably pretty far removed from that because she's reestablished herself as a pop force with Mayhem, so she'll be able to do her own actual international tour with this record. I also have enjoyed her acting to this point, with A Star Is Born, House of Gucci, and even Joker 2. I think she's a really great screen presence. Obviously, the peak is still A Star Is Born, but looking forward to seeing her act as more in the future. But yeah, let me know, what did you think of Lady Gaga's 7th album, Mayhem? What was your favorite moment on the album? What's your favorite song? Or music reviews? Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, all my nostalgia? Dave here with my review and recap of Formula One Drive to Survive Season 7 on Netflix. Of course, the docuseries famed at this point for increasing the popularity of Formula One in the United States and really being the most successful series of its kind in terms of day in the life recapping of a recent sports season. Netflix has now attempted this with other sports to up and down success. I think Drive to Survive is still the gold standard for that. Now, this is a series that is less popular, certainly more polarizing with the true Formula One fan, and less so for the casual viewer. As an F1 fan myself, who watches every race, every qualifying, really a hardcore fan of the sport at this point, I look for things that DTS leaves out, and that kind of, informs my viewing of the series. And I'm pleasantly surprised when there's fun insights or moments that I hadn't previously seen, and they kind of add a little bit of flavor to the season that followed. That being said, when you actually watch the sport and you intently follow it over the 9-10 months that it's on, during active season, you pretty much know all the storylines. You're pretty much up on all this stuff, so you're not really being told anything super new, but there's fun angles and stuff and whatnot. Now, on the other hand, DTS sometimes will present things in a more contrived manner. I think that's more of a problem in past seasons, and they've largely rectified that more recently. And now, more than anything, I almost kind of like fantasy football, fantasy manage like DTS in terms of how would I frame the show? How would I tell the story over the course of 10 episodes? Because at the end of the day, they have limited real estate with that season, and as a result, they will leave things out. And I find interesting the decisions that they do make. So I'm going to highlight the stuff that I think they left out, whether it's a big deal or not, and then just talk about the things that stood out to me that we did see. The top storylines Formula One Drive to Survive Season 7 left out. Number one, everything about Aston Martin, namely the fact that they stole Adrian Newey from Red Bull Racing. Newey leaves Red Bull, which was a big part of the turmoil of what was going on with Red Bull last year. DTS talks about that turmoil, highlighting Max potentially going to Mercedes, Jos Verstappen asking for Horner to be removed after all the controversy with the allegations against him. They leave out the fact that the greatest car designer of all time leaves the sport and goes to Aston. And I think it makes sense because there's really nothing else to the story with Aston. Last year, the car continues to slip down the order. There's not a whole lot to talk about. I think they can frame that next year when they talk about 2026 and Aston's great hope to climb back up the mountain. So I understand it, but I did feel like the key thing that was left out, given how much oxygen we gave that at the time last year. Another key storyline that was left out would be Franco Colapinto coming in for Logan Sargent last year. Now, there is a Williams-focused episode in Season 7. They talk about Sargent not being good enough and being dropped. And I think we even see a few glimpses of Colapinto. His name is mentioned once or twice in terms of some really used footage, not in any interview setting. But they don't really get into Colapinto at all and really just talk about the framing of, Carlos Sainz going to Williams. And to me, it's kind of an unfortunate thing to be left out because that was another huge storyline last year because Colapinto really kind of, shot off like a firecracker last season once he got into the seat, so much so that he was a key figure in terms of silly season. Would he remain at Williams? Would he become an Alpine driver? Would he become a Visa Cash App Racing Bulls driver? There was a lot going on with Colapinto. We didn't really know his fate for a long time before he ends up being released and is now an Alpine reserve driver threatening to knock down Jack Doohan's door. There's a lot of angles to the Colapinto story, and again, I assume they'll talk about that in the next season of DTS, especially if he gets a drive this year. But it again feels like something that was unfortunately left out. Some other things with Alpine, Bruno Farmin replaced with Ollie Oaks. They just completely gloss over that, don't mention it at all. I think that would have been an important thing to mention with Briatore coming into Alpine, something that's a big focus of DTS this year. And similarly, they don't talk about any of the Endstone controversies with Alpine, namely the fact that they're not going to be a works team in the future and stop producing their own engine. Pretty big deal. Should have mentioned it. Just for the human interest angle of what makes Drive to Survive a compelling series, I would have loved an episode about Zhou Guanyu in China, going back to the China Grand Prix after several years of COVID delays and cancellations. Zhou, the first Chinese driver, all the attention he gets back home. Seems like a really natural and obvious fit for an episode of this show. I mean, think about all the episodes we had about Haas over the seasons, because Steiner was such a star. Surely you could have done an episode about Zhou racing back home. But I get it because there's not a huge storyline to tell about Sauber. They continue to be dreadful and we're just waiting for Audi things to happen. They could have brought in Bonato back into the fold when he, joined back up with Audi after all the leadership changes. Bonato, a previous figure on Drive to Survive, but they just don't really go there at all. The last big thing, I think, would be their stewarding inconsistency and Red Bull and Verstappen's beef with stewarding and the general driver revolt against the FIA. I'm sure there was some controversy DTS and Netflix didn't want to get into, but there's a lot of stuff that's still unresolved that they should have talked about, I think, with that. Some minor things. They don't talk about Ollie Berman actually subbing for Sainz at Saudi. They just mentioned that Sainz missed the race because of his appendix. They also don't talk about George Russell being disqualified and Lewis inheriting his second win of the season. Despite all that, though, I think the season did a pretty good job of highlighting the core beats of the season. Those are just some things that stood out for me after watching it all. Let me know, though, what did you like most about Season 7? What did you think was the biggest omission this time around? In terms of what we did get, Episode 1, kicking things right off with Lewis to Ferrari makes sense because that happened before the season began. I honestly expected a bit more of that through this season. Lewis not a big part of this season overall. He doesn't really participate in the show too much. We know Max doesn't participate really at all, and that comes across, I think, a little bit. I love the grid shoot interactions in Episode 1. And I was a bit surprised, I guess, that they devoted so much time to the Red Bull investigation. I think they know that Horner is such a big star for the series, and he's effectively the Max replacement in terms of POV and mouthpiece on the show. It'd be pretty stupid to not acknowledge the truth of the matter. And I think they portrayed it pretty partially, which is not something you could say about how they handled Abu Dhabi 2021, which I thought they presented in a really cowardly manner. I liked in Episode 2, they talked about Lando no-wins and the pressure on Norris, Jensen Button on the show. I believe this is his first season participating as a talking head. Lando being a partier, Lando being soft. I wish they would have driven those home even more, but I appreciated the narrative. They talked about him getting his first win at Miami, and I think they did a decent job of portraying the luck factor to it. Maybe could have hammered that home just a little bit. And then they really got into the contact, between him and Max and the beef or lack thereof. I think they should have done more with Norris bottling starts all the time and just kind of not putting a weekend together. I think that was a narrative that they really should have hammered home, like when he qualifies poorly at Baku, is it? Like, there was a consistency in his inconsistency that I think they could have hammered home just a little bit more, given he was a key protagonist in the season. Episode 3, Mercedes episode, more about Lewis leaving, really from Toto's perspective. And they really get into the potential options of who will replace Lewis. They don't even mention Bottas, which I thought was a bit surprising. They did give a good amount, I think, of time to Max to Merc, and that's probably some of the easiest, most interesting things you see this season is Toto talking about the pursuit of Verstappen with his wife and other members of the team and whatnot. Talking about can George handle the responsibility, question we still ask, by the way. They don't mention the George DQ or anything. They do talk about the one win he got. And then they actually go into Kimi Antonelli being selected right then and there in that one episode. I actually thought they would have stretched that out a bit more. In episode 4, Carlos Sainz, great title. Of course, they already set up the fact that Sainz was being dropped for Lewis. And they kind of get right into Williams. Again, they kind of gloss over Sargent being dropped. Talk about Sauber a little bit, showing the pit troubles early season. I like that they gave us the Carlos Sainz Sr. Audi connection with his rallying career. And they do talk about Sainz holding up the market. I think they could have hammered that home a little bit, just how long that takes. A big thing with this season is, and this show in general, is it kind of has to go back and forth, as it'll give you a POV, give you an angle, and then progress several races forward. And then we're going to have a new episode with a new angle, a new POV. We're going to start back over and progress back to that series of races for the most part. So there's natural backtracking with the show, just the only way you can do it. And I think one of the greatest pieces of footage was Sainz not immediately signing with Williams and kind of leaving them at the altar after previously communicating that he was ready to sign. That was pretty interesting. Also in this episode, we have Flavio Briatore entering, and they did a great job, I think, of showing some of his controversies. They do highlight Crashgate. They talk about that. I think they kind of undersold it. On the other hand, though, there was a lot more to say about his abilities, and they don't really talk about the fact that we assume he was brought on to switch up Alpine for an eventual sale. But it is kind of nice to have him be an actual talking head participating and talking to Netflix. I did appreciate that. They could have done more with Ocon lunging Gasly at Monaco. I think the controversy regarding that, that contact, teammate on teammate, I think they actually didn't even tell you just how horribly that was received in the moment and by the team. But Ocon and Briatore's no love lost is pretty well communicated from both sides, which I enjoyed. Episode 5, you knew this episode was happening. Leclerc's Monaco curse, a fixture of the season to this point, fixture of Leclerc's story to this point. And then you get that rectified. I think that was just one of the greatest moments of the season last year. Episode 6, more McLaren stuff. It's funny. Zach has a quote in this episode that I just don't agree with. It's Will Buxton quote. It's like, the McLaren drivers are ready. Is Zach Brown? Yeah, it was a Buxton framing. And it's like, wait a minute. That was not the case. Yes, McLaren was not ready with their strategy, trying to, be too cute with having 2 number ones, the papaya rules bullshit. But the drivers were not ready either. Piastri isn't fast enough, and Norris kept making tons of mistakes. And again, they didn't really go into that enough. So I thought that was a kind of a strange framing. Overall, though, they do give us the key stuff, which is Budapest, Lando versus Piastri. Why wasn't Netflix talking to Piastri about that? We didn't really hear from Piastri at all in this season, only Norris, which I thought was unfortunate. There's a funny quote from Horner in this episode talking to the producers, whatever, about not portraying him as a villain this year like they did in the first 6 seasons. Pretty funny, pretty self-aware from Horner as well. Who is a very dislikable person, but is also a great character on this show. They talk about Red Bull dropping down the order and Perez falling off. And, they follow this up in episode 8 with Perez's replacement, and you get the return of the former star of Drive to Survive, Daniel Ricciardo, and, leading us to Liam Lawson, Ricciardo being dropped. What they don't really do, though, is talk about, a lot of the anticipation of Ricciardo moving up mid-season to the Red Bull seat, especially, with the summer break. And it's because the show doesn't really talk about, or doesn't do a good enough job, I think, of talking about how poorly Perez dropped the ball. Wasn't fucking up so much. Red Bull would have had a chance at the constructors still. In general, I think they kind of gloss over a lot of that. Of course, they also gloss over Yuki Tsunoda's candidacy, despite the fact that he beat Nick DeVries handily, beat Daniel Ricciardo handily, and also beat Liam Lawson when they went head-to-head as well. They don't really talk about Yuki at all. I'm assuming this will come up next year on the show, as Yuki is set to leave the Red Bull family after this year and has a Honda Aston connection coming up. So hopefully that comes up soon, but a bit disappointing to hear that. I did enjoy David Coulthard talking to Horner and saying that he could do a better job than Checo was currently doing in the second Red Bull seat. That was great to hear. I also enjoyed them showing Lawson and Perez's beef, and the middle finger from Lawson and him just going, full tilt early on. Episode 9, I also had a funny quip too, where they're kind of framing the midfield battle, the fight for 6th place. And they talk about the top 5 teams, even though that's kind of a dumb framing because Aston is clearly a 5th team in a tier all on their own. They are not comparable to the top 4 teams, kind of like a lazy, not correct way to present it. But I think the battle for 6 was kind of interesting. I would have, again, loved some Colapinto context here. Ocon to Haas, Jack to Alpine, Berman to Haas, all solid. And then, of course, the Alpine Brazil double podium. And then Ocon getting dropped a race early. I loved the double podium aspect of that. And at the moment, I was like, are they underselling Max's participation in that race? Of course, that rainy race in Brazil last year. But then, no, they do it in the next episode, which I thought was great because that was just a masterclass of racing. One of the stories of the season. Max going from qualifying 17th to winning in a dominant fashion in that race. Again, they almost undersold that a little bit just because of how significant that was. I would have loved more, again, like context on like the criticism of Max's wheel-to-wheel combat with Lando. Like it gets mentioned a little bit in that episode. It was nice to see the Lewis George pass at Abu Dhabi to end the season. The way they present it in the context of the episode, though, is they make it seem like it was middle of the race and not the last lap because it's not the last thing they show. I thought that was pretty funny. Max Piastri turn 1 collision at that race that Juan Pablo Montoya apparently actually predicted, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah, like I enjoyed the season. I mentioned at the beginning the things I thought were left out that were worthwhile to discuss. Kind of nondescriptly barely mentioning that Magnussen, Bottas, Perez are not on the grid for this year. They talk about Ricciardo, being dropped off. That's kind of it, though. But given that the 2025 F1 season is looking very interesting, very tough to predict in certain respects, in theory, setting up for another intriguing season of Formula One Drive to Survive, given we're at the precipice of a new regulation set. We'll find out. Let me know, though, what you think of Drive to Survive Season 7. What you like most about it? What was the key thing you thought was left out? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Mickey 17, the latest science fiction dark comedy film from Korean directing legend Bong Joon-ho, starring Robert Pattinson. This film has been hotly anticipated and long awaited for numerous reasons. One, of course, Bong is coming off of his greatest film, Parasite, which won Best Picture 5 years ago now. It's been a long time. And on top of that, his follow-up film, Mickey 17, was shot in 2022, finished in January 2023. They've been sitting on this movie for 2 years. And there's been a lot of concern about how this movie would eventually get to us, namely myriad release delays and even stuff independent of the strike. I mean, this was initially dated for a late January 2025 drop, which did not seem like a release date that made any sense for the next movie from Bong after Parasite. But thankfully, Warner Brothers did get behind the movie again. Early March release instead, premiering at Berlin last month, seemingly treating the movie with the respect and gravitas a Bong movie deserves. This, of course, is Bong's third English language film following Snowpiercer and Okja, and it's actually getting the widest release of those three. Snowpiercer, of course, had a limited run, and Okja, of course, was a Netflix film. I loved Mickey 17. This is another Bong Joon-ho banger. Robert Pattinson is tremendous in this movie with 2 distinct performances that are both very memorable. Mickey 17 is classic Bong Joon-ho. It's weird, it's unique, it's funny, it has great momentum and pace. Like many of his movies, this is very much a genre movie. It also has lots of socioeconomic and class comment, again, like a lot of his work. At the end of the day, though, this movie is just a blast. It's so fun, it moves with such verve, it's a great time. It still has the quirks and the touches of a real filmmaker behind it, and Pattinson is right at home in this world. I really just had a smile on my face almost the entire time watching the movie. Bong, of course, not new to genre at all. Think back on Snowpiercer, Okja, The Host. He does this, right? This is a sci-fi movie through and through, but has, a bit of a familiar but high concept in the sense that Earth has been ruined by humans. We're leaving Earth. Some people are anyway, to form new colonies, and that's where our titular character, Mickey Barnes, played by Robert Pattinson, finds himself. Him and Steven Yeun's Timo, they're fleeing Earth because of a debt to a loan shark, and they join up with this colony on its way to a far off world, and this colony is being led by a former politician with grand ambition, Kenneth Marshall, played by Mark Ruffalo, and joined by his influential wife, played by Toni Collette. And Mickey Barnes, of course, signs up to be an expendable, this new technology where humans have their biodata downloaded and they can effectively be 3D printed when they die and then still retain all their memories and emotions and things like that. And as a result, that framework, that sci-fi concept of the expendable really sets the movie up to kind of really take off running, because you get this extended voiceover introduction from Pattinson, which is a ton of exposition explaining the sci-fi of it all. But what it allows us is to see a really entertaining montage of all the various Mickey's deaths before we come to know the current Mickey 17. And of course, following a situation where Mickey 17 is believed to have died, out in the tundra of the new planet that they land on, he actually does survive and returns to the ship that the whole colony is still living in, and finds that they printed a new Mickey already, Mickey 18. And that's where the movie really takes off, because Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 are two very different characters. They have two different personalities. They're different dudes. And Pattinson is just flexing on us because he's really giving two distinct performances, and it's a blast. And there's a lot of great humor with it. Naomi Aki's Nasha character makes a strong impression in that regard. A headstrong soldier in the colony who links up with Mickey and has a romance with them. The movie just does a really good job of playing the two different personalities of the Mickeys well. Steven Yeun's Timo, definitely a supporting part in the film, but his character as this kind of like bully guy who always takes advantage of Mickey, it's an effective character for sure. Mark Ruffalo's Marshall, this would-be populist politician leader type who clearly has a lot of like despotic and self-important dreams. He's a bit of an asshat, look at me type. I mean, it's obviously on the nose performance, very satirical, but even if you understand the reference points, I still think the character is really effective as the main antagonist of the movie. Bong, he's not usually the subtlest guy in terms of what he's trying to say, and he has a lot of similar themes across his movies, so you can kind of understand his point more often than not. But just because you grasp it doesn't mean it's not entertaining, doesn't mean it's not effective commentary. And really, the movie is quite interior. It's quite insular for the majority of Act 1 and Act 2 when we're spending time, in and around the ship once they've landed, and beforehand, the journey in space still. And, the movie, I think the production design with the interior of the ship looks really good. I mean, this movie was shot completely on the Warner Brothers lot in Livingston, and I think it looks really good. And then the movie actually really expands in the third act, where we see a lot more of the creeper characters, as they're deemed by Marshall, these alien creatures that are encountered early on by Mickey 17 when he's left for dead. Of course, that creature design, the creature aspect in the film, very reminiscent of Okja. I think the creature design very reminiscent of the Ohms in Nausicaa: The Valley of the Wind, Miyazaki's first Ghibli film. But honestly, this was a movie that I kind of just wish Act 2 went forever, because I was having such a blast with the time, with the concept, with the two Mickeys. And I think there's a lot of funny humor in this movie. There's a lot of weird quirks. There's certainly gross out moments and body humor in it for sure. But whether it's the physical comedy, whether it's just kind of great comedic timing and line readings, different characters having different point of views, taking things very serious and anything but, like, it's just such a blast to be with the movie. And while I do think the climax, as it gets really big, I do think it completely works and lands. I would have loved just to spend so much time in the middle. Once again, hats off to Robert Pattinson. He's just one of the best that we have right now. He continues to make the best choices, working with A-list talent on the directing side only, always doing interesting work as a performer. He seemingly can do anything. He's such a beast. And Bong, again, like, the filmography speaks for itself at this point, and we know that we won't have to wait nearly as long as we did last time, a 5-year wait between Parasite and Mickey 17. We already know that Bong is halfway through an animated movie he's making right now that he says he expects to release in 2027. So I'll take a 2-year wait over a 5-year wait every time, especially when it's one of world cinema's greatest. So yeah, Mickey 17, this movie, Bong's most expensive by far, $118 million budget reportedly. It's performing both overseas in Korea, elsewhere overseas, certainly in the US. It's performing like a specialty release, even though it's an English release. Like, it's not gonna earn that money back, in the traditional business sense. But frankly, who gives a shit? Like, Bong had a blank check after Parasite and the rest of his career. It's kind of funny that David Zaslav gets to hold the bag on this one, of all people. But hey, this movie's a blast. It's so good. Certainly a movie I would like to revisit in the future. I just really had a great time with it the whole time. Let me know, though, what'd you think of Mickey 17? What'd you like most about it? What do you want to see next from Robert Pattinson? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. The return of Bong Joon-ho with Mickey 17, starring Robert Pattinson, and the return of Formula One Drive to Survive Season 7 on Netflix. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, see the links below. Get the best of 2025 Spotify players linked below. Let me know what's good, and let's get into it.